Adolescence. This is going to be a lot of fun. So we get to talk about what you guys, most of you guys, just went through. So here we go. Here we go. Markers of adolescence. These are known as rites of passage. It may include religious blessings, separation from the family, severe tests of strength and endurance, marking the body in some way, or acts of magic. It all begins with puberty, the process that leads to sexual maturity or fertility. And here are some rites of passage. This is a bar mitzvah of the Jewish faith. This is a graduation in Africa. This is a fertility rite in another African nation. This is an Apache coming of age ceremony for a young lady. Beer bong, drinking out of a beer bong at a party, being able to hold your beer. Look at all the beers up there. And this is a first communion. Quinceañera is a Latin, Latina becomes a young woman at 15, and that's what quinceañera means. It means a celebration of 15. This is some of the pictures from a quinceañera. This is, of course, the young lady that is turning 15. Here she is. This is her cousin, I believe. A cousin is part of the rite. This is her mother, and this is her sister. These are her sisters. And there's the party. And let's see, he's with her, and he's with her, and that's the mom, and that's the young lady. And here she is with her sponsor. Wait a minute, did we see her before? Yeah, it's this one right here, isn't it? No, it's not. Anyway, that's her first drink of alcohol with her cousin. And there she is, coming out party, age 15. First day, okay, so for a Canalda, the day ritual activities. The first day, her hair is combed. She dresses in a special outfit. She molds her, I'm not sure what mold is there. She has to run in the morning. She grinds her corn. She puts a pot of wheat near the outdoor cooking fire after the molding. I guess she's molding her canalda cake. Second day, she runs. She grinds corn again. She spreads the wheat in the sun to dry after digging the pit. She soaks her corn husks while working on her batter. The third day, she runs in the morning. She grinds her corn again. She digs the pit. She builds a fire. She makes mush, and this is the blue mush that she's making. She puts the batter in the pit. She blesses it. She covers the pit. She gathers soapweed root and white clay for the morning while the individual is singing. The fourth day, at dawn, she runs to the east while 4 songs are sung, one 12-word song, unless the ceremony is the first Canalda, when this song is omitted. She makes an offering to Mother Earth. She prepares white clay basket during the racing songs. She lifts children after the molding. A girl goes back into the hogan after returning the goods, and they retie her hair as a woman. You guys may know more about. I'm sure you know more about this than I do. I found this on the internet. That's why I put this in here. And this, who knows? This may be from the West, it may be from the East, it may be from the checkerboard, it may be from up in Utah. But this is the Canalda ceremony that I found online. The opportunities and risks of adolescence, the opportunities for growth. They grow physically, of course. Cognitive and social competence is acquired during adolescence. They try to achieve autonomy. They break away from their family unit. They try to develop self-esteem, and of course, they tend to become more intimate. There are risks of adolescence, of course, difficult handling, so many changes at once, and that they may need help in overcoming the dangers along the way. There are lots of risks out there. Society and their peers tell them how to act. Um, they may start drinking heavily. They may use drugs because their peers tell them to. Sexual activity, of course. This is the first time they've ever felt this strong a sex drive. And then, of course, there's always gang activity out there. Now, this is really kind of curious. These three guys, this is theoretically they're gang members, but that's the Bloods. This is the Crips. And that's one of the Hispanic gangs. I think it's the 42nd Degree Kings or something. Purple. They're wearing their colors. And of course, they certainly wouldn't be sitting together if they were gang members because they're not supposed to do that. How puberty begins, sharp increase in production of sex hormones leads to rapid growth in height and weight, changes in body proportions and form, attainment of sexual maturity, of course, the estrogen in both males and females, but especially in females, estradiol production is 8 times higher in females than it was when they were before they started going through puberty. The androgens in males, testosterone is 20 times higher in males. Now, if you look at this, you can understand why there are some extreme reactions to the increase in hormones. One day you're sitting watching cartoons, and the next day, after you've awakened the next morning, your testosterone level is 20 times higher than it was the day before. If you're a young lady, it's 8 times higher. Your estrogen or your estradiol is 8 times higher than it was the day before. No wonder that you feel different. There's a 7-year range for the onset of puberty in both boys and girls. It usually takes about 7 years from the beginning to the end. The process typically takes about 4 years for both sexes and begins about 2 or 3 years earlier in girls than it does in boys, depending on where they are and the environment that they live in. Not that strange, I guess. Timing, sequence, signs of maturity. The average age for boys is about age 12, so their voices start changing at age 12, gets deeper. It can be as early as age 9 for boys. It can be as late as age 16 for boys. And I was closer to 16 than to 9, I can assure you. Average age for girls is about 9 years of age. Can be anywhere from, can start at age 6 and maybe last as long as age 14. The signs, they have the adolescent growth spurt, of course. One of the things that they notice first, they certainly don't notice themselves growing, but what they do notice is all of a sudden they've got hair where they didn't have hair before, especially pubic hair. Armpit hair as well. For little boys, they start developing an odor, a more manly odor, a stink of form. Their voices get deeper. Both the boys and the girls have deeper voices, and they get their adult musculature. They begin to get their adult musculature. The primary sexual characteristics are mostly your sex organs. The females are born with their ovaries, they're born with the fallopian tubes, they're born with a uterus, and they're certainly born with a vagina. Males are born with their testes, they're born with a penis, a scrotum around their testes, of course. Their seminal vesicles, which is inside their body, and their prostate gland are all sex organs that they are born with. Those are your primary sexual characteristics. Your secondary sexual characteristics for the male, the testes will grow, will descend and grow. They will have pubic hair that grows. Their chest becomes larger. Armpit hair growth, muscle growth. Their voice becomes deeper. For the female, the secondary sexual characteristics are a little bit more obvious. Enlargement of the breasts, enlargement of the uterus and vagina, narrowing of the shoulders, widening of the hips so that they can bear children. Their voice becomes more high-pitched, and of course they grow pubic hair as well as armpit hair. And here's some more secondary sexual characteristics. The female characteristics: growth of breasts sometime between the 6th and the 13th year. Growth of pubic hair sometime between the 6th and the 14th year. Body growth between 9.5 and 14.5. Their first period, actually, first period, some females are achieving first period, their menarche before the age of 10, but the average is between the ages of 10 and 16.5. Their underarm hair starts growing at about 2 years after their pubic hair starts to appear. An increased output of oil and sweat producing glands, and this, of course, requires deodorant for their underarms so that they don't have as strong an odor. The other thing is that it causes acne, causes pimples, or can. It really all depends on how much oil they have, how much exercise they get, what kind of foods they're eating. Not just for young ladies, of course, but for males as well. As a matter of fact, the male oil and sweat production is more extreme, tends to be more extreme than the young lady. For the male, their secondary sexual characteristics: their testes and scrotal sac will grow, will become larger. That's somewhere between the age of 10 to 13.5. Their pubic hair will start growing between 12 and 16. Body growth, 10.5 to 16. This gets kind of interesting because sports become very important, or have been very important for these individuals up to this point. And right around adolescence is when some boys grow early, some boys grow late. A lot of times, if they are a late developing individual, then they will have dropped out of sports by this time because they can't compete with the kids that are larger. Growth of the penis and growth of their penis. It's of course they're born with the penis, and their prostate gland. This occurs between age 11 and 14.5. And also their seminal vesicles. They have a change in voice about the same time that their penis starts to grow. First ejaculation of semen about 1 year after the penis expands or begins to expand. Facial and underarm hair about 2 years after appearance of their pubic hair. And then, of course, the sweat glands we've already discussed. Males can reproduce as soon as their sperm appears. Well, probably not. Even with the first production of semen and as nighttime ejaculate, probably they can't. That isn't going to happen. The human body practices all the necessary functions before the function is actually needed. Babies will move inside the womb, of course. The newborn will exercise its limbs. Pre-adolescent boys who have not been sexualized will experience the same reflexive activity with erections while they sleep. Those of you who have had little boys know that sometimes they will have an erection when you're changing their diaper and when they're small. It's not like they want to have sex. Doesn't have anything to do with sex, actually. What it has to do with is their bodies practicing or getting them, making sure that these muscles, if you don't exercise muscles, if you don't walk, then your legs will atrophy. The muscles in your legs will atrophy. Well, it's the same way with just about all the functions, and that includes a male erection. This activity will continue all their lives as the brain checklist to make sure that all the equipment still works. This will happen until the day they die, potentially. Sorry, my cats are having a fight. At about age 13, the male adolescent may have actually ejaculations of semen during his nightly erections. These are known as nocturnal emissions or wet dreams, and is an involuntary reflexive act. The boy's first ejaculation is called spermarchy or first sperm. It may be several years before the sperm he produces are actually produced in large enough numbers and in correct form to actually impregnate somebody. One of the things we know about semen production, and sperm production, the sperm counts of males in the world has been going down since we started counting, actually, and that was right after World War One. We started counting sperm and men's ejaculate, mainly to find out why they weren't reproducing. That's one of the basic reasons why we were counting them. I was a laboratory technician, and that's one of the jobs that I did was to count sperm. Really kind of interesting. Right after World War II, sperm counts were fairly high. The sperm counts that we see today are about half of what we were seeing right after World War II. Really kind of fascinating that sperm counts are going down. It may have to do with overpopulation, may have to do with pollution, may have to do with some of the substances that we interact with, such as marijuana. We know lowers your sperm count and also causes more abnormal forms. Alcohol, of course, tobacco, the pollution that we have may lower testosterone levels, may lower sperm counts. Really kind of curious. And it's something that, of course, if we stop reproducing, or if our reproduction slows down, this may be something that we take more notice of in the future. The sign of maturity for girls is menstruation when the uterus prepares itself for implantation by the fertilized ova. The first menstruation is called menarche and occurs some time around the 12th or 13th year. That's the average, of course. However, menarches can occur from age 10 to 17. It's been known for them to occur a lot earlier in select cases. Research shows that girls from affectionate families actually show a more delayed menarche. Girls from single mother homes and ones without affection in their families tended to reach menarche earlier. And of course, we can speculate. As a psychologist, you might speculate that this may be because they are looking for love. They're looking for affection, and they are doing this by with the early menarche, thinking that, well, this is all happening without conscious thought, but that they are looking for to get out of the house earlier. Maybe that has something to do with it. While maturation and sexuality have been taboo subjects in many areas of the world for a long time, doctors and other people who are aware of such things have noticed that menarche is happening earlier and earlier than it ever has before, a phenomena known as secular trend. Doctors and researchers think that we are seeing a secular trend because better health due to better nutrition, lower rates of communicable diseases due to immunizations, greater access to health care, children raised in a home with a non-biological parent have earlier onset of puberty. We've known this for a long time. Now remember, one of the things that that you need to remember is that divorces were almost impossible in the United States until the 1960s and 1970s. So growing up in a household with a non-custodial parent was unheard of before the 1970s actually, and since then, of course, single parent families have become more prevalent because of divorce. Synthetic hormones in the water supply is another reason. Stressful family environments because of the possibility of a divorce. Kikuyu adolescents, boys show puberty before females. Chinese adolescents, girls develop pubic hair before breast buds, which is backwards. Normally in the West, the breast buds develop and then the pubic hair starts, but in China, it's the other way around. African American adolescents, girls develop breast buds and pubic hair earlier than white girls do. Hormonal changes in puberty. Girls and boys follow very different hormonal paths at this life stage. Young ladies are very much different than young males, as you can see. This is estradiol. Both males and females have both testosterone and estradiol. Males have a lot more than females do. Testosterone will eventually become your sex drive. It's the testosterone in the hypothalamus that creates the male and female sex drive. Estradiol and testosterone in the male have to do with production of sperm. And in the female, of course, it has to do with menstruation. Timing of the physical changes, we've already seen this when we were talking about this earlier. Early maturation in males leads to more poised, relaxed, good-natured, popular with peers, likely to be leaders, less impulsive than late maturers. So early maturing males are better. These two kids are the same age, as weird as that is. Late maturation in males leads to feeling more inadequate, self-conscious, rejected, and dominated. They are more dependent. They're more aggressive, insecure, or depressed. They have more conflict with parents and more trouble in school. They have poorer social and coping skills and think less of themselves. And that's mainly because everybody is bigger than they are. Early maturation in females leads to being less sociable, being less expressive, being less poised, more introverted and shy. They're more vulnerable to psychological distress and remain so at least through the mid-teens. They're more negative about menarche than later maturing girls. They are more likely to become sexually active with older boys. I've been teaching for a long time. In the 90s, I was teaching at Mississippi University for women, and I had a student who said, you know, it was pretty bad for me. When I was 6 years old, I developed breasts. Not just breast buds, I developed breasts. And the kids wouldn't play with me in my first grade and second grade classes. But the worst part was that the high school boys would drive past the playground and they would hoot at her. This is in Mississippi, of course, but they would hoot at her because here she is, this girl with fully developed breasts, and she was around all these little tiny girls and all these little tiny boys, and here she was. She looked like a teacher instead of a student, and it caused a lot of trauma for her because the boys just wouldn't leave her alone. The high school boys and the junior high boys wouldn't leave her alone. Late maturing females tend to be happier than their early maturing peers. They seem to enjoy the protection of childhood into adolescence. They're more likely to do well and stay in school. They become sexually active later. They are more likely to go to college than early maturing females. Physical activity improves strength and endurance, of course. It helps build healthy bones and muscles. It helps control weight. It reduces anxiety and stress. It increases self-confidence. The sleep needs of this at this time during adolescence, adolescents or pre-adolescents who have irregular sleep schedules are chronically sleep deprived and sleepy in the daytime. They show symptoms of depression and they tend to do poorly in school. Nutrition and eating disorders. Obesity is the most common eating disorder in the United States due to too little physical activity and poor eating habits. By age 15, more than half the girls in 16 countries are dieting or think they should be dieting. Anorexia nervosa is a distorted body image which leads to eating very little or starving oneself. Symptoms include inability to maintain body weight, fear of weight gain, lack of menstruation, distorted body image. Some researchers have found a connection between anorexic daughters and competitive mothers. Now, this is a picture of before and after. This is her when she was anorexic, and this is her after she started eating again. I think I have more pictures. Nope. Bulimia nervosa, they tend to maintain normal weight and recognize abnormal eating patterns. They go on huge eating binges within a short period of time, usually 2 hours or less, and then they try to undo the high caloric intake by self-induced vomiting, strict dieting or fasting, engaging in excessively vigorous exercise, or taking laxatives, enemas, or diuretics to purge the body of the extra weight they have gained. Eating disorders are more common in cultures that emphasize slimness. Treatment options, hospitalization, medication, psychotherapy. The effectiveness, 1/3 of individuals treated for anorexia will remain anorexic. 1/2 of individuals treated for bulimia will relapse, continuing problems as individuals dealing with these disorders age. And of course, it has to do with appearance and the desire to look the way that you think you're supposed to look. Use and abuse of drugs. Substance abuse is the harmful use of alcohol or other drugs, a poorly adaptive behavior pattern lasting more than 1 month. Substance dependence or addiction may be of psychological, physiological, or psychological, or both. It likely continues into adulthood. While substance use is rare before adolescence, it is common by the end of adolescence. By graduation, rates of marijuana use by seniors is higher than cigarettes. Substance use is highest in Native American and lowest in African American and Asian Americans, while teenage substance use has gone down in comparison to previous generations. It is still much higher than it is comfortable for society. And then the abuse is in your family, a serious tragedy. And when the abuse is in your family, in other words, if not only you are using, but also the parents and potentially the grandparents as well, brothers and sisters, everybody's using. It is during adolescence that many teenagers are introduced to their first step on a possible road to adult addiction. The gateway drugs are drugs that in and of themselves are not seriously addictive, but drugs that set a precedent of need that can only be fulfilled with more of the gateway drugs or stronger, more addictive drugs. And the 3 gateway drugs now are that they consider gateway drugs are alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana, but not in that order. It's actually nicotine, alcohol, and then marijuana. And usually they start in that order. They first start to smoke, then they start to drink, and then later they add marijuana. Romantic relationships increase over time, Asian cultures later than other groups. Romance is less formal than previous years. Relationships and sexuality are viewed differently due to culture. Permissive cultures tolerate sexuality. Semi-restrictive cultures have prohibitions about sexuality and romance. Restrictive cultures have strong prohibitions against sex and romance. 47.8% of U.S. high school students have had sexual intercourse. This worries some researchers because adolescents are not emotionally mature enough to handle the aftermath of sexual activity. Only about 2/3 of adolescents protect themselves by using a condom. Teenage pregnancy is always a possibility. Worldwide, individuals below the age of 25 account for 45% of all the HIV infections. 11% of all births in the world are to teenage mothers, while individuals between the age of 15 and 24 only represent 25% of the population. They represent 50% of all sexually transmitted diseases. This is the youngest lady to ever have a baby. She was 6.5 when she gave birth, and there's her son right there. She was impregnated by her father was arrested for what happened, but it turned out that it wasn't him. It was somebody else that impregnated her. But she became pregnant at 6.5. She was from Brazil. Teenage pregnancy rates in developed countries. As you can see, the United States has the highest teenage pregnancy rate, and that would be between the ages of 15 and 19. And you can see all the different countries. I don't have a date, do I? I'm not sure when this was. Oh, wait a minute. What was my question? Why are rates so high in the United States? That's a good question. The APA has recently defined the changing sexual mores in the United States as sexualization, a social phenomenon where people are valued for their sexual appeal and behavior and nothing else. This is especially a current problem with females as we are bombarded by Sports Illustrated swimsuit models and Victoria's Secret angels in their underwear. They had stopped the angels for a while. They had a television show on. It was like an hour long, I guess. I've never seen it. I do get Sports Illustrated, and I used to get the swimsuit issue, but I didn't get one last year. I think they still have the swimsuit issue. Anyway, they're going to start the Victoria's Secret Angels again this year, this spring. It isn't hard to see how girls might base their self-worth on identifying as sexual beings. Piaget's stage of formal operations usually develops around age 11. Individuals develop the capacity for abstract thought, leading to a new, more flexible way to manipulate information. They can use symbols, they can understand metaphor and allegory, they can imagine possibilities and can form and test hypotheses. Formal operations give the individual the ability to perform abstract thought such as historical time, extraterrestrial space, algebra and calculus, allowing symbols to represent symbols, think in terms of what might be, not just what is, can think in the context of idealism. Piaget's formal operations stage of cognitive development allows the individual to form hypotheses and develop means to test the hypothesis through deductive reasoning. Other developmental psychologists, including the author of your texts, Arnett, have estimated that between 1/3 and 1/2 of the late adolescents and adults do not develop or do not use abstract thought. What was I reading? 1/3 of the people who graduated from high school have never read a book since high school, and it was 1/4 of the people who have graduated with an undergraduate degree from college never read a book again in their lives. And here I am. I read 5 books over the break that week. I read 5 books that week. Though adolescents may look like adults, most adolescents, especially males, do not yet have a mature prefrontal lobe. Studies looking at the activity of brain found that while adults tended to process emergency information in the prefrontal lobe, where reasonable thought takes place, adolescents process the information through the amygdala, where emotional arousal and instinctual thought takes place. And this may answer a lot of questions as to why Teenagers you've known have reacted so strangely in an emotional situation, fighting and or committing suicide, whatever. They reacted emotionally to something that if they had been older, they would have been able to think through and not have done what they did. This may account for increased impulsive risky behavior, especially in males, and account for driving, drug usage, and sexual activity. This is a movie that was made while I was in. Well, this is made in the 1980s. This is a trailer from the movie, I think.
We're going to make 30 a mandatory retirement age. And we're going to set up rehabilitation camps, mercy centers in every state of the Union. Citizens will report to them after 5 years, at the age of 35. And there, in groovy surroundings, we're going to psych them all out on LSD, babies.
Now, this is from the 1960s. So
that way, they're not going to hurt you, and they're not going to hurt me. And babies, they're not even going to hurt themselves anymore. They want drafters. We'll draft them. And some of them are really going to dig it. And that's going to be the real mother-loving gas. There's going to be cats who want to split from taxes, diners club, crazy birds, crazy wives, and crazy husbands. Millions, true, but millions are going to go willingly. Just tell them they don't owe nobody nothing. And baby, what a wrap-up.
Suffer unto me, little old lady. The best campaign dinners are no campaign dinners. Contribute, contribute, contribute to yourself. The best campaign dinners are no campaign dinners. Contribute, contribute, contribute to yourself.
oh, that's enough. Anyway, Wild in the Streets. It was a movie that came out in the middle '60s. They were talking about young people taking over the government, and you can see what happened. They infected, or they gave everybody LSD. As weird as that may seem. Elkind, immature aspects of adolescent thought manifests itself in at least 6 characteristic ways: idealism and criticalness. They are convinced that they know better than adults how to run the world, as we just saw in Wild in the Streets, and argumentativeness. They often become argumentative as they marshal facts and logic to build a case. Immature aspects of adolescent thought, indecisiveness. Adolescents can keep many alternatives in mind at the same time, yet they lack effective strategies for choosing among them. Apparent hypocrisy. Teens do not recognize the difference between expressing an idea and making the sacrifices necessary to live up to it. Self-consciousness. Adolescents often assume that everyone else is thinking about the same thing that they are thinking about themselves, of course, and this is known as imaginary audience. And specialness and invulnerability. Adolescents think they are special, that their experience is unique, and that they are not subject to the rules that govern the rest of the world, and this is known as personal fable. Kohlberg's levels and stages. Contrary to socialization theory, which attributes moral behavior to early upbringing and internalization of societal standards, the cognitive developmental approach holds that people gradually develop their own moral code as they reach higher and higher levels of thinking. This is, so Kohlberg came up with the Heinz's dilemma, moral dilemma. And this is the story he came up with that he asked people about. And from this, he wanted them to tell him what they would have done. In Europe, a woman was near death from a special kind of cancer. There was one drug that the doctors thought might save her. It was a form of radium that a druggist in the same town had recently discovered. The drug was expensive to make, but the druggist was charging 10 times what the drug cost him to make. He paid $200 for the radium and charged $2,000 for a small dose of the drug. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could only get together about $1,000, which is half of what it cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell it cheaper or let him pay later. But the druggist said, "No, I discovered the drug and I am going to make money from it." So Heinz got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. Should the husband have done that? That's Heinz's moral dilemma. Should he have broken into the store to save his wife's life? The pre-conventional morality, level 1, in pre-conventional morality, people act under external controls, obeying rules to avoid punishment or get rewards. And this is usually, the pre-conventional morality usually lasts from age 4 to 10 years. In stage 1 of pre-conventional morality, orientation toward punishment and obedience, it's okay if he steals a drug because it is really only worth $200. But the opposite argument to that is he shouldn't steal. It's always a crime. Stage 2 of pre-conventional morality, conforming to the rules because of self-interest. It is all right to steal because he wants to save his wife's life. And in stage 2, he shouldn't steal because it is all right to make a profit. So these are the arguments in stage 2. Level 2, the conventional morality. People are concerned about being good, pleasing others, and maintaining the social order. And this is something that people think more about after age 10. Stage 3, maintaining mutual relations, approval of others, following the golden rule. A good husband should steal the drug. He shouldn't steal if the wife dies. It won't be his fault. As long as it's not his fault, it's okay if she dies. Stage 4, developing a social concern and conscience. He should steal it. Otherwise, his wife's death is his fault. That's in stage 4. It is always wrong to steal despite the reason. And now we get to stage 3, the post-conventional morality. Recognize the conflicts between moral standards and make their own judgments on the basis of principles of right, fairness, and justice that they determine themselves. These principles of right, fairness, and justice. Stage 5, morality of contract of individual rights and of democratically accepted laws. Taking the drug may not be right, but it is justified. The opposite argument to that is extreme circumstances do not justify breaking the law. Stage 6, morality of universal ethical principles. Heinz is morally right to steal. He must respect the sanctity of life, and that is his wife's life. And the opposite of that is Heinz should act in accordance with all lives affected, and that is the post-conventional morality or level 3 morality. Evaluating Kohlberg's theory, instead of viewing morality solely as attaining control over self-gratifying impulses, investigators now look at how children make moral judgments based on their growing understanding of the social world. Neither Kohlberg nor Piaget considered parents important in moral development. Both psychologists grew up in a time where social control was stronger than individual or familial control. Other researchers have discovered that when parents speak to and listen to their children about their morality, children tend to advance through the stages of moral development faster. So what we need to know is historically, who were Piaget and Kohlberg. Piaget was born actually in the 19th century, and he wrote into the 1970s. So that's the time frame when Piaget was alive. He was alive during World War I. I don't think he fought in World War I. He was Swiss, so he didn't. Switzerland was a neutral country. So he not only was a mature adult during World War I, but he was also went through World War II, of course, in Switzerland, where they are a neutral country. Kohlberg was born at the beginning of the 20th century, so he's a little bit younger than Piaget, but he died young. He died in his when he turned 60. And he died in the 1970s as well. So they grew up in a different time. They grew up in a time that was a more authoritarian time period. So they considered there was a lot more social control at that time. Religion controlled society and told you how to act and where your morality should come from, not parents. It was the church, it was the government, it was society that was more important than your parents. Morality may be in the eye of the beholder. Kohlberg may do little but reflect Western morality and assume it is universal. Buddhist monks in India actually scored lower on Kohlberg's dilemma than lay people did. Some feel that Kohlberg's stage 5 and 6 are possible only for individuals following a specific type of philosophical reflection. And if you noticed whoops, I went the wrong direction. No, I didn't. Yeah, the post-conventional morality, not all that common that they have found in the world. Whoops. Right and wrong has different meanings in other cultures, and now, if I were lecturing in a classroom, I would ask you if the death penalty is moral or amoral. Surprisingly, 66% of the population thinks that it is moral. Not public executions, but the death penalty is moral, and 27% don't believe in the death penalty. There you go. Divorce, is divorce immoral? Is it moral or amoral? This was really important in the 70s and 80s when divorce first started becoming a common phenomenon, or now it's not a phenomenon at all, but it used to be a phenomenon. I think I told you before that I started grade school in 1955, and there was one divorced family in my whole school, not just in my class, but in the whole school. And the individual that was from that divorce was in my class, and he was a good friend of mine. His father had remarried, and he lived with his father and his new wife. 65% felt that divorce is morally acceptable. 26% did not think that divorce was morally acceptable. Medical research using stem cell obtained from human embryos. This stem cell research, and this was a big argument during the Bush administration between 2000 and 2008. And it was passed by Congress that they could use stem cells to do from human embryos to do cancer research, and he vetoed it, even though it was passed by Congress. So the question is it okay to use stem cells from human embryos? And 64% felt that it was morally acceptable, and that's what Congress said. It was just the president that said it wasn't, and it's still illegal in the United States to do stem cell research using human embryos. 30% said it was morally wrong, but the president of the United States was one of those individuals. Is gambling morally wrong? That's the question. I guess if you own a casino like you guys do, you should think, because it's part of where all your money comes from. The Navajo Nation's money anyway. 63% felt that it was morally wrong. Gambling is morally wrong. 32% felt that it was morally acceptable. Suicide, is suicide morally acceptable or morally wrong? And actually, we don't have any statistics on that. Cloning humans, is that morally wrong? Cloning humans, 11% think that it is acceptable. 86% think it's unacceptable to clone humans. Polygamy, when one husband has more than one wife at the same time. This, of course, is more acceptable in an area that has had polygamy, such as southern Utah and northern Arizona. And 8% find polygamy acceptable, 90% find it unacceptable. Married men and married women having an affair. This is a famous affair. She was a reporter having an affair with Petraeus. He was a 4-star general, and he was leading he was in charge of the military in Afghanistan. Anyway, they had an affair. He had to get a divorce, as weird as that is. 6% think that it's acceptable for married people to have an affair. 91% find it unacceptable. Medical testing on animals. Rats. 59% think it's acceptable. 37% think it's unacceptable. Sex between an unmarried man and an unmarried woman. Is premarital sex acceptable? 59% think it's acceptable. 38% found it unacceptable. As children grow into adolescence, their problem-solving skills continue to improve. Adolescents develop the ability to carefully consider a problem using whatever steps and in whatever order necessary, a process known as task analysis. After determining the process of problem solving, the individual will encode the process. The problem solving process and encoding the information is part of dialectical reasoning. As children age, their families become less and less important to them, and their peers and friends become more important. Influence shifts from families to friends. In adolescence, this shift becomes more profound as peers begin taking up more and more time. Since masses of people are unwieldy, adolescents will form friendship groups that will become very important to the high school-aged individual. Adolescents who have similar desires and interests will tend to interact with one another on a frequent basis, forming a crowd. And of course, these are some of the common crowds: jocks, populars, nerds, grunges, goths, thugs, brains. And here's some more: punk, scene. I'm not sure what that is. Gamer, hipster, nerd, indie, and I can't remember what that one is. Anyway. Normally, crowds are so large with people falling in and out so that frequently it is impossible to know everyone in a group. The small group of intimates that someone knows in a crowd is known as a clique. And these guys, this is Sailor Moon, I think. These are Japanese. This is a Japanese clique of Sailor Moon girls. A high school is no picnic anywhere. This is in the Japanese schools. There is a hierarchy, and in the top they have the jocks, the bad kids, the b-boys, the dumb sluts, the musicians, the players, the bullies, drunken party people, dropout bikers, and skaters. That's in the top tier. In the middle tier are the norm wannabes. The normal ones, the wannabes, the better looking nerds, the slackers, the goths, the artists, the mature ones who don't give a cuss about cliques. And then in the bottom are the nerds, the ugly ones, the dorks, the targets, the outcasts, the floaters, the libs, if not good at sociability, and the grubbies. So if you grew up or if you had a high school that was kind of like this, this is probably the top tier group here. They're probably the dumb sluts, I'm guessing. Or maybe the drunken party people. Anyway, there you go. Even in Japan. Aggression and bullying. Children who seek dominance and control may be especially sensitive to slights, provocations, or other threats to their status. Instrumental aggressors view force and coercion as effective ways to get what they want. Studies agree that children seeing televised violence act more aggressively. Erikson, identifying versus identity versus identity confusion. A teenager's effort to make sense of the self, not a kind of maturational malaise. It is part of a healthy, vital process that builds on the achievements of earlier stages, trust, autonomy, initiative, and industry. It lays the groundwork for coping with the crisis of adult life. Identity versus identity confusion. And of course, this is a joke. After many years of therapy, Waldo finally finds himself. Find Waldo. Three major issues of identity: choice of occupation, values to believe in and live by, a satisfying sexual identity. And of course, this is a male who identifies as a female. And this is a look at the 105th Congress. That was about 10 years ago, I guess. Most of them were lawyers or in business, in public service, education, agriculture. Only 30 of them were in agriculture. Real estate, 28. Journalism, 21. Medicine, 14. Law enforcement, 10. And you can see all the rest. Identity versus identity confusion. Cliquishness and intolerance of differences. Both are hallmarks of adolescent social scenes. They are defenses against identity confusion, so that you identify. This is the identity part of it. So if you identify with a clique, you are fighting your identity confusion. Individuals need a stable identity before reaching intimacy, and this may explain prolonged cohabitation and less frequent marriages in adolescent and young adults. Adolescents and young adults. What else? If you've ever seen the movie Grease with John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John, one of the reasons, Grease is about identity versus identity confusion. Are they going to be thugs? The girls are the pink ladies and the boys are shark. No, they're not the sharks. Anyway, and in the end, of course, everybody changes. Johnny Zuko tries to become an athlete so that he can win Olivia Newton-John's character's hand. And Olivia Newton-John becomes a pink lady of sorts, a biker chick, so that she can fit in with Johnny Zuko. Anyway, it's an interesting movie. It's all about identity versus identity confusion. Marcia saw the struggle for individuation to establish one's own identity outside of one's parents as represented by 4 types of identity status. Identity achievement is where crisis leads to commitment. Identity foreclosure is where the individual has commitment but has never been in crisis. Identity moratorium is where the individual is in crisis but has no commitment yet. And identity diffusion is where the individual has no commitment or no crisis. Ethnic factors in identity formation. For some adolescents, ethnicity may be central to identity formation. Many minority youth feel conflicts between values stressed at home and those dominant in the wider society. Adolescence is a time when sexual orientation becomes obvious to the individual. Historically, people kept their sexual orientation secret, but now they're more likely to come out, of course. Homophobia can make coming out traumatic. Parental rejection can be a concern. However, acceptance by peers may be increasing. Seems to be increasing, since it's legal for same-sex people to be married. Electronic games are especially popular among boys. 94% of middle school students play. 1/3 of boys play every day. 11% of girls play every day. Favorite games involve violence, could be related to anxiety and depression. Use may be related to feelings of power, fame, and dealing with stress. The kids may be using the games to achieve a cathartic effect on negative feelings. The great majority of crimes are committed by young people between the ages of 12 and 25. Crime rates peak about 18, then decline. This crime trend has been true for over 150 years. It is thought that this is true for 2 reasons: increased peer importance and independence from parents. 2 types of delinquency: adolescents, limited delinquents who start getting into trouble as adolescents and stop with adulthood, and life course delinquents. They are persistent delinquents who start from birth and continue into adulthood. Types of depression: depressed mood, enduring period of sadness, no other related symptoms of depression, a major depressive disorder, clinical diagnosis, specific symptoms, depressed mood, appetite disturbance, sleeping disturbance, and fatigue. Causes of depressed mood could be conflicts, disappointments, poor performance in school. Girls are at higher risk than boys are. 2 types of treatment: antidepressant medications and cognitive behavioral therapy. Resilience is good outcomes in spite of threats to adaptation and development. Protective factors are high intelligence, effective parenting, adult mentor, high self-regulation, ethnic identity for minorities, and religiosity. And that is the end of adolescence. Well, not really. We'll get into more of it next time. So I'll talk to you next week.